Hey, hello everyone. I'm Taylor Chambers, and today I am joined by Savvy Esposito. I don't know if I got the accent right there, but we're trying. So, welcome, Savvy. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah. Do you put a little Spanish flair to Esposito or something like that?
Esposito is actually my husband's last name. He's Italian and
Ah,
Irish. So,
okay. All right. Well, that's a fun combination, I'd imagine.
yes. Yeah.
All right. Well, welcome. To let people know a bit about you, you've got a background in forensic psychology,
Yeah.
which I think is a really cool angle to bring to this um, problem area and solutions that you provide to people. So we'll talk a bit about that. You're also a nationally certified life, relationship, and recovery coach. And not only are you a certified coach, but you help certify other coaches. And so you run an addiction academy program for people. And then, of course, you do a lot of the direct coaching for couples
Yeah.
and navigating, the exactly what we're talking about here, the sexual addiction, betrayal trauma, and all the related issues that can go along with it.
Yeah.
So cool. Well, our discussion today is going to talk about some of the foundational elements to getting started in recovery and building for the long term and how we can make that sustainable and kind of what indicates that we're on a course for something long term and going for the big picture there. So excited to get into it.
Awesome.
Um, okay, well, let's start off with some of this background stuff. So tell us about how forensic psychology came to you, how it informs your work now, and kind of how that's woven into your work.
Okay. So, I originally went to SCAD in Savannah, Georgia, and I was studying writing, dramatic writing, and photography.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, I experienced some sexual traumas while I was at college, and it made me think that I should have followed my heart, which I love
Hmm.
writing, but I really have, from a young age, always asked, why do people do what they do?
Mm-hmm.
Why do they bully? Why do they hurt someone? What leads someone to make a choice like that and then continue to make that choice? And so I left SCAD, and that is actually when I met Jack, my husband. And I decided to go to John Jay College of Criminal Justice and study forensic psychology. And the original goal was for me to get my degree, and I wanted to pursue either becoming an FBI agent, police officer, lawyer. I wasn't sure which track to go with, but I was very fascinated in all of those tracks. But then I had a kid, and I didn't want to put myself in the line of danger. And I also, I found out about my husband's addiction, and I knew that people should be able to get help for this. And there was no help available, at least not in our area in Connecticut 8 or so years ago. And I took my forensic psychology knowledge, all of the experience I've had in my own journey of recovery, and we just hit the ground running with recovery. And we did a lot of trial and error, but he is 8 years clean. We are still in recovery. I am someone who believes that you are in recovery for life. I don't think there's I hit 3 years clean, so I am recovered. I feel like we're always growing. Um, and so I would not have touched becoming a coach who works with recovering porn addicts or betrayed partners if I didn't have the knowledge and training I have, because it's a really slippery slope, right? Like, I believe that if you're a coach in this area, you do need specific training for it, because a lot of times you're going to see things that you're not going to see if you're just a life coach or if you're a business coach, right? And if you don't have the training to spot certain things, when to refer out, like, it can just get really messy. So I only went into this because my training. I have a passion for helping couples recover from this because I've seen it happen, not only with me and my husband, with my co-coach Chloe, and with many of my clients. You can recover and save your marriage if it is something that you each want.
It's a cool message of hope that you bring to it. I love that it's born out of personal experience, and I love that it involves a very unique but important angle on the work.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you describing like I went into writing and then into forensics, like as I've gotten to know you through your emails and stuff over the last little while, yeah, I all of a sudden clicked. I'm like, yes, there is that blend of like tough and artistic. That's like,
Yes.
yeah, that's savvy. So that's pretty cool.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, so let's get into when you work with couples, you're wanting to kind of start with, let's build up the foundation. And so, what are some of the building blocks that you might try and ensure are in place early on for a couple?
So, first, I have a policy where I don't like to take on clients unless they've actually had therapy, especially if the sexual addiction is rooted in trauma. Just because, I do believe therapy is needed for a lot of people going through the journey based on the statistics of sexual trauma or abuse coinciding with sexual addiction. So that's like ground level is where I just, have you been to therapy or are you currently in therapy? The second thing is education. A lot of times people are not aware of what betrayal trauma is or what porn addiction is or even believe in it, because right now, sexual addiction is not in the DSM, porn addiction isn't there, and there are therapists out there who don't believe in it. There are therapists who will tell you it's not real or invalidate your experience, and then it sets you back in your goals. So really vetting your help, being educated in what pornography and sexual addiction is, as well as betrayal trauma, and how that interplays, because it's not just, okay, well, you've got your recovery over here and they've got theirs over there. Each recovery is going to impact each other. And sometimes your goals and your partner's goals are not going to align, or what you need right now is not going to align. And how do you navigate those dynamics, the common dynamics that will show up in recovery? So being very clear about expectations and education is very important. Another foundation is cleaning house. We call it the purge. You go through everything to set yourself up for success. So this is part relapse prevention, coping skills, accountability, trust building. But clean devices. If there's anything that allows you to engage in your behavior, how do we like shift the environment? Do we rearrange the room so it feels new? Like, you got to break the neural pathways that you've built, and your environment is going to play a key role in your success. So cleaning up the environment, knowing that accountability is really important in recovery, and that as a recovering addict, like, your partner is not necessarily the best accountability partner. They don't need to know every little thought that you have. It's really about the actions you're taking. And so finding a different accountability partner and educating around just those common pitfalls that couples will go into so they don't fall into them. Obviously understanding what a boundary is, what a consequence is. There's a lot of misunderstandings about what a boundary is. Like, boundaries are not there for control. Consequences are not there for punishment. There's a whole section on disclosure that I do, like talking about it, educating about it, and then what is the best way to do it, right? Do you have a therapist? Are you going to do it at home? And the fact that disclosure is not just a one-time event. It is something that is ongoing. You're going to have to build communication skills in as well through this journey. If you cannot communicate, you're going to end up in these really escalatory fights, and you want to avoid that. I mean, the absolute self-hatred and shame that the recovering addict feels can be so debilitating. And the absolute earth-shattering realization that your partner is not only an addict but has been cheating on you, because most betrayed partners do feel like it's cheating. And that's valid. And I tell my clients, all feelings are valid, not all feelings are fact. So it's okay to feel your feelings. And it's important to validate that in the moment. And if there are things that are not factual, you can address them later.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, trust is a huge part of recovery, especially for the couple. And one of the biggest, I think, things that I guess the industry or the messaging out there gets wrong is it's not about micromanaging the recovering addict, right? Are they being accountable? Is there like software telling you if they're doing something or not? Or it's also about the betrayed learning to trust themselves again.
Mm-hmm.
And that part gets missed. And I think that sets couples up for a very unhealthy dynamic because the betrayed could be micromanaging the addict and the addict could be doing everything right. But unless she starts to trust herself, nothing he does will ever be enough.
Yeah.
So that's got to be accepted. There's more, but I hope that helps something in terms of an understanding.
Yeah, absolutely, and let's certainly get into the more. But what I'm hearing so far is you've got a pretty structured approach, if I'm hearing it right, which is really brings a lot of sense of safety to people. But yeah, early on, it's taking a look at some things like sounds like the trauma you're wanting to be addressed, kind of in a dedicated space, and then we'll be working on the construct of the recovery. And so I love the idea of the clearing house, and the education right up front of like, let's figure out how we can all be on the same page, same expectations, same language, same understandings of this process. And then you can see how that sets up. Then from there, we can start digging into some of the more emotionally charged stuff, things around communication and trust and accountability and things like that. So
Yeah.
I imagine that for a lot of people, particularly those who are feeling disoriented and this is like a new experience, those kinds of things would give a lot of stability to the overall experience.
Yes. I mean, I work from a framework and I call it the Phoenix model. My belief is that every human being is flawed and no one's perfect. And just because you're, quote unquote, the addict, the betrayer, you're not the bad guy. You've gone through things that have led you to where you are. And just because you're the betrayed, it doesn't mean you're the victim.
Mm-hmm.
I like to empower both sides and hold space for both sides. And I do have a very this is kind of step by step the things that we're going to work through if you want to save the marriage. Because sometimes we start to do the work and then the betrayed is like, you know what? I don't want to save this marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the addict also makes that choice too.
Right. Yeah. And it's a lot of work and it involves moving through a lot of pain.
Yeah.
And sometimes growth is more available outside of relationship, and sometimes it's I grow by staying in the relationship, and both could be really really important options to be considering. So
Yeah.
um, so whether it's more at the foundational layer or maybe more as the foundation gets set, that frees us up to focus on maybe more advanced recovery goals or something like that. How does this generally progress for couples?
So I would say first 30 days are the worst after D-Day, which is Discovery Day or Disclosure Day.
Mm-hmm.
Once you hit around 6 months, if you've already done therapy, if you're either working with a coach or you're watching, YouTube videos or you're reading books, you're getting educated, you at that point might have more skills and education to be talking every day, being honest, building that trust back. And once you get to a maintenance stage of recovery, which usually is around 2 years because of the way that it takes for the brain to heal from this, the neural pathways. At that point, it really frees you up to explore more. Because in the beginning, the emotions are so high and it's all very valid that a big part that couples tend to either be, I guess, gun shy about or nervous about is sex, right? Because in our culture, we have so many messages, and in pornography, there's a script that is shown to you. And so when you actually try to build back that sexual intimacy with each other, it's not just about, okay, so we're going to not do what we saw in porn, or this is what society taught me, so I have to do this. It's really, there's a deep self-exploration that has to happen where you guys get to build a sexual life together. And I believe that if you're doing your individual work alongside the relational work, it just allows the relational work to flourish, because you can't do the relational work if you haven't become empathetic, if you can't name your emotions, if you can't broach a topic that might be a little scary to talk about. Because without vulnerability, you're not going to be able to gain intimacy. And intimacy is really what you get after you do a lot of that foundational work.
I like how you frame that. I think sometimes intimacy can feel like an expectation of like, we're married, why aren't you being intimate? Whether, I mean, I'm mostly talking about emotional intimacy in that sense, but
Yeah.
But seeing it as like an outcome of working the process and doing the work internally and in the relationship, I think that's useful. Of like, there are things to be done in order to build that intimacy in. And it definitely is sometimes even scary or threatening to consider how do we rework the sexual dynamic in the relationship. I think for a lot of people, it's easier to just avoid that altogether, and kind of disown that aspect of yourself. For both sides, I think that's why a lot of times intimacy anorexia can show up for a lot of people who are in recovery. It might be that they're recovering in a way that pushes that away. And for a lot of those who have felt betrayed, it's just like, oh, I don't want to go near that anymore, right? But I like how you put it, that it kind of demands some deep work, right? Of like, okay, if we're going to build this sex life together, we got to figure some things out.
It really does, because and I'm just going to use me and my husband as an example. So my husband, he realized that the root of his addiction was unresolved childhood trauma. And because of what he had gone through as a child, he viewed intimacy and closeness as something that is fearful, is scary, is painful. And so for him, porn was something that's safe. It's never going to reject you. It doesn't expect anything from you. And it's a very detached way to just, okay, well, if I fear getting rejected in real life, I'm going to be here on a screen and I will never be rejected. So I don't have to feel that. And so if growing up, you've never learned how to name your feelings, feel your feelings, and face your feelings and overcome those fears, how are you going to build a relationship with someone when it does demand work? It does demand presence. It does demand honesty and hard conversations. And so if he didn't do the work, well, I wouldn't be here. But, like boundaries, right? But, if he didn't do the work, then we wouldn't be able to have tougher conversations. We wouldn't be able to be emotionally intimate. Which also would mean that sexual intimacy wouldn't be very good, right? Because all of the different types of intimacy you have in your relationship build upon each other to allow you to have really great sexual intimacy. And I think for me, because of my sexual traumas, I had my own fears around sex. And so when we each think about how we grew up, our experiences, if we didn't do our own individual work, we would never be able to build a really healthy, passionate, connected marriage. And even if that work is scary, it's so worth it in the end.
Right. So again, it highlights you're talking about intimacy, and sometimes I think we're a little too on the nose with our efforts there of just like trying to force sexual encounters to be more pleasurable or something like that. And again, I'm just really loving the what you're speaking to, that all comes if you do this work that might feel really unrelated. For you guys, that involved trauma work, and for you guys, that involved practicing, emotional intelligence and communication skills, which might at that time feel really far removed from having great sex or something like that.
Yes.
But you're absolutely right that like all of this, I'm just kind of picturing like a, kind of a maybe a step pyramid or something like that. You're building layer on layer on layer in the recovery process, which means that in time we're working towards something that's, where we wanted to arrive at from the very beginning.
Yes. And I would say that like as you go through recovery, it is not about perfection. A lot of at least a lot of my clients, at least the recovering addict, feels a lot of pressure to be perfect for their betrayed partner. I cannot relapse. I cannot lie. I cannot make one misstep. I cannot, screw up with the chores. I have to be perfect because I screwed up the relationship so bad. Like there's this heavy thing on their shoulders. And same with the betrayed, because they're like, I have to be thin. I have to dye my hair to look like what he watched. I have to do this or he will leave me, right? There's each of them has their own pressure, and if it's not spoken, it just creates such a massive distance between them.
Yeah.
And so if they are able to acknowledge that recovery is not about perfection, but it's about progress, it takes a lot of that pressure off.
Yeah. Well, because it's so discouraging to set yourself up for an impossible goal.
Yeah.
In my marriage, for example, I had this implicit rule that we had to start giving direct voice to, which was my wife should always be happy, which is just ludicrous, right?
Yeah.
But it's kind of that perfectionistic idea of like, oh, and that didn't work for me growing up, that expectation. Like I proved that I couldn't be happy all the time. And so the idea, but it was just kind of there in the background.
Yeah.
And it can be really discouraging when we're operating from those goals that don't really line up with reality, rather than working on goals that are building up toward mastery.
Exactly. And I think when speaking on goals, it's really important to not set the goal to be too big, because then you're set up to fail. Like like if you have the overarching goal of saving your marriage, then we break it down into smaller goals. What do we need to do to get to that place? Well, we need to start being honest. We need to stop any cheating behaviors. We need to do our own individual work. We need to start communicating every day or something, right? Just a check in. But there has to be certain things that you can do that are action based, that are behavioral, that are measurable, so you can actually see the progress. And I think that's part of why when people think about either therapy or coaching, they're like, ugh, what does it really do? Because it's so hard to measure. Like if you hire a business coach, I'm going to get an ROI of like $20,000 on this business coach because they're going to help me set up my marketing funnel, right? Like it's very concrete. Whereas if you do therapy or coaching, it's not that concrete. And it's harder for them to see that by doing these things that they might not think are related are really where those like places where there's that 1% or that 1 degree change that actually impacts everything down the line.
Yeah. Well, and that goes back to kind of your early education for couples. By laying out kind of those kinds of expectations, it's going to help make those bumps not so rough.
Yeah.
Because it's like, we talked about this. Remember, this was part of the plan, right? Mistakes happen. So let's enact the game plan that we established or whatnot. And so, that feels like it's helping everybody to kind of figure out where they bring their focus, which can get really hard when you don't have some of that guidance or a framework to work out of. So
yes, for sure. Just to share like a common pitfall for couples, I see a lot of times, and I was guilty of this too, where the betrayed partner has figured out, oh my God, my partner's an addict, and they're scared. So they start doing the work for the addict. I found you the therapist. I found you the coach. I found you this book. Oh, read this article. And it comes from a loving place and a place of fear sometimes, where it's like, oh my God, I don't want him to not choose me. I don't want him to not choose recovery. But if the betrayed partner could sit, watch, and wait, I mean, not do their own work, but don't do their work, right? Just watch their partner and see if the partner is actually choosing recovery on their own without the pressure, because that's more telling. Behavior is a language. It is communicating to you. So what is your partner doing? Are they looking up a therapist? Are they going to a 12-step meeting? Are they even interested in recovery, or are they content with where they are? Do they not even want recovery? Which is a hard truth, right? No one wants to feel that. But
well, it's a hard question to answer, or it's a hard question to ask, because we don't want certain answers.
Yeah.
But it's a very important thing, because, rather than getting the right answer, we truly really do want the honest answer. And that really comes with our non-interference.
Exactly. I mean, I've seen couples where, they've been together for 20 years and she's been waiting 18 years. And she's still there thinking he wants recovery because she's been doing it all. He never initiated. And it gave her the illusion that he was interested in the recovery, in her. And it's a lot of lost time. And time is something you just can't get back.
Yeah. My joints are reminding me of that recently. I'm watching the Olympics recently, and I'm like, I remember my more athletic days. I was never super athletic, but time slips away from all of us, I guess.
Yeah.
But that fear of asking those questions of like, what would happen if I just observed? That's really, really understandable. But you can see that there's some loss by trying to play that game of trying to manufacture something that may not really be there. So.
Yeah. I mean, sorry.
Go for it. I've got a follow-up, but go for it.
I was going to say, I mean, even if it's really hard, I would challenge the betrayed partner to just set a goal of 1 week. Just 1 week, 7 days. It's very small. Just see for 1 week, what does your partner choose to do? And that's information. It's data. It helps you make informed decisions.
Exactly.
It's a very small goal.
Yeah, it's a very small goal, and it's going to feel like that, that impulse. I do this with my kids, right? I'm like, okay, I'm going to wash your dishes. No, wait, you can wash your dishes. Why am I washing your dishes, right?
Yeah.
And so, if you can like not do your partner's recovery dishes, just do your own. And it means you might have to deal with a bit of a mess, but you're going to understand where the partnership is at. And that will help you understand what responses and practices are going to be important for you. So
exactly.
Well, so now in that regard, when you observe a couple, or when couples are observing their own process, are there particular signals that says this is on track, or hey, this is likely setting you guys up for long-term sustainable recovery? Are there characteristics or maybe practices that tend to correlate with, good, solid, long-term work?
Yeah, I would say when the recovering addict is able to be honest and is initiating consistently.
Initiating like verbal communication, like check-ins and things. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I have a recovery exercise called ACE, and it's an exercise they do every day. And the recovering addict, it is their responsibility to initiate this exercise. And honestly, if you do this exercise for 30 days, Couples come back and they're like, I have not felt closer to my spouse
Mm-hmm.
since we met. Like, this has
Mm-hmm.
been missing forever. And if you do the work, it works, right? But if you're doing it consistently, you're going to see the positive change.
Mm-hmm.
And even when you see that positive change, if you continue to do it, that is important, because I think the biggest reason why people will relapse when they're 2, 3, 4, 5 years into being like clean, right? It's because they stop doing what worked.
Mm.
When you stop doing those little decisions that made all the difference in the beginning, that is when you're going to see recovery go downhill. So if you are consistently doing the check-in, or if you're going to your meeting, or if you have that best friend who's your accountability partner, whatever the things that you have put into place to allow you to be successful, if you continue to do them, that tells me that you are going to have a long-term successful recovery, because you're committed to doing it beyond the immediate reward. So that's just one of the biggest things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's that kind of even if there were no betrayal, even if there were no addiction, even if there were no problems, if a couple isn't having some basic, exchange of here's what I'm feeling, here's how my
Yeah,
day went, even, um, then any couple would drift, right? And so
exactly.
that's solid maintenance for any relationship. It just happens to be particularly crucial when there's been rupture. Like that's how we start to come back together. And
Yeah.
but it's not what you're saying is um, it's not just short-term work that helps stabilize us. It's long-term work that helps maintain us. So that's a
Yes.
pretty cool indicator of like, hey, that exchange of emotional intimacy on a regular basis is going to be a really key indicator for people.
Yeah, I would say also, I don't know how to measure this. It's a feeling, but if you can tell that they're not just checking a box,
Okay.
they're showing up and you can feel their presence and their engagement, it's much different than having a partner checking the box. Because when Jack and I were early on, I could tell when he was just checking a box. And I could
Mm-hmm.
see when it flipped to, I genuinely want this for me. It's not just about the relationship. I don't want to be an addict. I don't want to live this way forever. I want better for myself. And I think when the recovering addict does it for themselves and not just for the relationship, that's where you see a lot of real change.
Yeah. Right. Well, and for the partner, it doesn't feel great to be appeased. I mean, it kind of does.
Yeah.
It's gratifying a little bit, but that
Yeah.
fades pretty quickly.
I was gonna
And
say it's short term. It's not gonna
yeah.
sustain you over the long road ahead, right? I mean, I always told
Mm-hmm.
Jack, no matter how we end up, you should want recovery for you, because, like, I don't know, what if I die, right? What if I get hit by a car tomorrow? Are you still gonna choose recovery? Or are you just doing it
Mm-hmm.
for me? So it's when you realize that I'm done with living like this. I don't want to feel shame. I don't want to feel the self loathing. And I want to be, whoever, whatever your values and your beliefs, are, right? Who do you want to be? And go make the decisions to be that for you, not for anyone else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of what you describe, I forget the exact phrasing. I feel like it comes out of, I don't know. It sounds kung fu or something like that, but like the path is the goal.
Mm.
When we stop trying to get somewhere, more the Western side of things, it's not the journey, it's the destination. No, it's not the destination, it's the journey.
It's
Yeah,
the
you got
journey.
it.
Yeah.
But yeah, like when it's not when a tool isn't necessarily a strategy to get life to be just the way that we want it, it
Hmm.
becomes more immediately inherently satisfying. Like I do this because I want to do this, or I want to feel like I'm growing its capacity, or something like that. There's a
Yeah.
different tone to it when it has that sensibility. So
Yeah, for sure.
cool. Hmm. All right. Well, so we could keep going. We talked about maybe we'll have to reconnect here in the future. We talked about that before jumping into the interview, but I know that you've got an important next step for people. So you've offered something in the all access implementation bundle, and it's called the How to Tackle Triggers in Recovery.
Yes.
Something like that, right? Okay.
Yes.
We're laughing because I mentioned it earlier and I almost said tickle somewhere in there. So no tickling. Well, I don't know, maybe tickling's involved. So how can this resource help people in their couples recovery journey?
So the training around triggers is really helpful because a lot of times you as a betrayed partner are so concerned with, oh my God, my recovering addict watched XYZ and now they're triggered by XYZ. So then you're triggered by XYZ.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the addict isn't actually triggered by that. Maybe they have a totally different trigger, right? So this training allows you to see what are, the recovering addict's triggers, what are your triggers as a betrayed, and then what are the triggers that are both of yours, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it also allows you to actually identify the types of triggers, because there's multiple types of triggers, right? It's not just going to be a visual trigger. It could be an emotional trigger, a seasonal trigger. So it helps you break down triggers by understanding whose trigger it is, what type of trigger. There's coping skills in there. It also goes into the 8 steps to a relapse. It's just a really good training to, again, part of it is education. There are what I call recovery opportunities in there for you to actually try and implement. It goes into like a trigger scale for a betrayed. So you can look at the way that you get triggered and assess, like, am I going to have a full-on betrayal trauma attack, or how do I catch it before it gets there? And what can I do to make sure it doesn't get there? Do I need to remove myself? Do I need to, there's so many things you can do. So it helps you really understand triggers, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what a trigger is. And there's just a lot of emphasis on like the visual or the sexual trigger, when it really is so much more than that.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like it goes all the way through to like, and what is our plan? Again, we're expecting some of these to show up from time to time. So knowing what do we do about the next time this comes around.
Exactly.
It's really, really useful. Cool. Awesome. Well, so Savvy, thanks so much. Obviously, this has been a cool discussion. Viewers, I would really encourage you guys to, first and foremost, check out the implementation materials in the All Access bundle. And that's going to support you in reflecting on what pieces of the foundation could I be bolstering, even if you've been at this for years, going back and seeing where can I brush things up, and am I engaging in some of the long-term sustainable work. And then definitely check out this, the Tackle Your Triggers in Recovery training. So the last thing I'll say is that one of the things I really value about structured approaches, I often do both in my work, and I guess here's why. Like, the structured approaches are not the same as some of the like experiential and emotional work. But Savvy, I love what you've described here, because I feel like it's kind of a platform from which all of that emotional work can really take place. And so if you guys do a good job cleaning house, setting up the accountability structures, putting out game plans for triggers and so forth, it's going to really free you up to then bring the full weight of your focus into the intimacy work that we talked about. So anyway, I'm just really excited about that. So viewers, hopefully you pull out your next action items out of this and go forth and enjoy the path, not the destination. Did I say it right that time? I think I got it right. So,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Take care.